Welcome everyone to On the Porch. I'm Jane Garibay, State Representative for the 60th District, Windsor and Windsor Locks. And I am here today with Representative Ann Hughes. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks for having me on the porch. I love being on the porch.
Thank you. In the good weather, I actually sit out on the porch, but not during the winter. Ann is in her second term, like I am, and she serves Easton, Weston, and Reading, the 135th District. She is Vice Chair of the Aging Committee, which I am also a member, on Human Services with me, and she's also on Labor. Ann works as a licensed master social worker for the Jewish Senior Service Institute on Aging and a coordinator for the Center for Elder Abuse Prevention. She's also devoted herself to public service, if anyone knows Ann. And I can just imagine when years ago she wrote a letter to President Nixon at the age of 7, requesting him to consider the use of boxing gloves and move of semi-automatic rifles for war.
Yep.
She was the program
director. I did say that. Yes.
That's awesome. Yep. For over a decade, which supports homes. It's called CLASS for adults with autism and developmental disabilities. She co-founded the Norwalk Peacemakers and began the Goddess Fairy Art Collaborative to host annual pop-up neighborhood art and music festivals. I'm going to have to talk to you more about that later.
Sure.
She graduated cum laude from College of New Rochelle with a bachelor's in art and political science, and earned her master's of social work at the University of New England in 2014. She resides in Easton with her husband, Tim, with whom she shares a love of community and has given a lifetime of community service. Welcome, and so happy to have you here today, Ann.
Well, thank you, Jane. Boy, that was quite the welcome and introduction.
You deserve it. And everything that's said, if you were in a room with other people, I would be able to say, they're talking about Ann. You're an awesome advocate for your constituents and for people in general. And I appreciate that. But today I had asked you to come to talk. One of the things that you're deeply involved in is elder abuse. What is elder abuse? So can you tell us a little bit about your work and what does that mean?
Sure. Thanks for asking that question, and thanks for having this topic on. It doesn't seem like a really sexy topic, but it's a widespread issue. Elder abuse and exploitation and neglect. I'm the coordinator of the Center for Elder Abuse Prevention in Lower Fairfield County here at Jewish Senior Services, but we serve the lower 12 Fairfield County towns, but also we participate with the Center for Elder Justice of Connecticut, and really this coalition of partners across the state that is really trying to elevate elder abuse prevention and who's at risk and the red flags, and really get to reporting it much more quickly and much more universally, because now we're in a time of extreme isolation, and that is one of the high risk factors for elder abuse and neglect. So we're the 6th oldest state, Connecticut, and so we have an awful lot of our aging community that are living out in the community. About 95% of us live, in our own homes or out in the community. There's another cohort that lives in long-term care. That is overseen by Medicaid and Medicare and the Department of Public Health for licensing. But we have a lot of elders at risk of exploitation, neglect, and abuse. And that can take many overlapping forms. It could be emotional abuse, it could be financial abuse, and that's gone sky high in this in the last few years. And we have moved from an awful lot of the majority of abuse occurs from known members, either family members or trusted people that the elder has, either lives with or taken into their close proximity of their life. However, we are seeing a skyrocketing rate of senior citizens being targeted on the phone and through the cyber, through digital, through their emails, through all kinds of media, of course, social media and everything else, for exploitation, but also scamming around personal data and cyber theft, and that's occurring universally. It's occurring much more for elders because it's so much easier to target elders. We can, these scammers and so forth can tell who is, where your email and digital footprint is, or even phone numbers, who has a landline, who answers the phone, and you're much more likely to be targeted. And they're very, very crafty about.
I've known a few people actually that get the phone call, we've got your daughter or we've got your granddaughter, right. Go to Western Union, cash, do it. And only for the grace of God, one called her son and said, I've got to go because, your sister's been kidnapped. Can you give me a ride? Thank God, but yeah, it's terrible.
And that's a very common scam, but it also emotionally hijacks that older adult because, oh my gosh, their loved one is in trouble. And so there's several hallmarks of this being a scam: to keep it a secret, to create urgency around the demand, to create untraceable, like Target gift card or wire transfer, or one of those untraceable amounts of cash, or just there's very, very little that a scammer has to do to understand who your loved ones are, maybe name them by name. That's very easy to find out. And so that happens more and more. And we've got a few tips to try to help protect people against that kind of scam. But I do want to elevate to the public, since we're talking about this, the risk factors for folks at risk of abuse and neglect, and then how to intervene, how to take a few tips of protection, and then how to report it. Because if nothing else that we can learn from our few minutes together, it's that we do have a robust protective services for the elderly that in this state, which is a part of the Department of Social Services. We are all essentially mandated reporters, and you don't have to have bona fide proof. You just have to have reasonable suspicion that somebody is at risk of abuse or neglect, or you suspect that they are being abused or neglected. You report it to PSC, to a qualified department, and they send a qualified social worker investigator to check in and do a well-being check, and to really look into the situation. And they often can bring resources and services to bear so that the person is safer in their situation. And so so I'm gonna share my screen if that's okay.
Sure.
And here we go. Oops. Share. Okay, here we go. So I'll start and end with this. We have several helplines that are like warm lines that we can talk it through. I operate the Center for Elder Abuse Prevention helpline right there, 203-396-1097. And oftentimes I'm talking to family members or concerned neighbors or loved ones that want to talk through something that they are concerned about. And that's a really helpful way. Sometimes I make the report and I'll make the call to report it, or sometimes I talk them through it and they can do that call. There is a Connecticut do not call list, which again, if we can start to protect folks right away from reducing the number of targeted scam calls that they get, that's helpful. It's not perfect and it needs to be updated. And I know Senator Blumenthal is working on a national do not call registry proposal to really help help mitigate the flood of targeting scams. So please make sure you share that. That's 1-888-382-1222 and put your loved one's phone number on that as a do not call list. There's also a consumer protection fraud hotline, which is what we often will report those financial fraud scams that are targeting. But the most important one is our protective services for the elderly mandated reporting helpline, and that's 1-888-385-4225. And after hours, after the hours of 9 to 5, you would call 211, the Connecticut 211 helpline, and say, I would like to make a report to PSE, Protective Services for the Elderly, and then they transfer that call. And then there's the Connecticut.
That we're all, excuse me, are you saying that we're all mandatory reporters, or you as a social worker?
Well, there is always more added to the list of who's mandatory reporters, and it's essentially any volunteer or professional or provider in any capacity that has a public facing interaction with the public. So this can be drivers, this can be Meals on Wheels people, this can be any kind of medical or even financial institution that has that has regular interaction with the public. So that's when I say we are all mandated reporters, because whether you are professionally paid to be or not,
Right.
we have an obligation and a responsibility. And so I want us to really take that to heart and not be afraid of it, and not be worried that we're being too forward with that responsibility. When in doubt, call and report it. So that's that number. And I can give you a list of who all that is, but it's like everybody, basically.
Right. It's better to err on the side of caution. Sometimes you feel silly reporting something, but it's better to err on the side of caution.
That's right. And so, during this period of coronavirus, ongoing pandemic, we see folks that are really isolated, and there's a bunch of scams that are really taking place around this. I wish I could make it bigger, but there's all kinds of offers for at-home vaccinations and home test kits. We really encourage elders and everybody in the public, hang up on robocalls. In fact, what's even better is have a trusted loved one put your phone contacts into your phone and don't answer it if you don't know who it is. Now that's really hard for the older generation. Like when the phone rings, you want to answer it. But if you do not recognize that, and even if you do, sometimes it's a scam because they've been able to put hijack your contacts in some ways and put them in.
But they'll leave a message. If it's important and it's real, they'll leave a message. So
that's right. So as soon as you can hang up and you realize that there's that pause and they're waiting for a real person to to pick up, and then they start going into either it's a robocall or it's someone you don't know. You got to hang up right away, because the longer you spend on the phone, the more you get targeted, not just by them, but by other bots and robots and so forth. We are also seeing a uptick in phishing emails and text messages, where it's you got to be very careful. Though we have asked people to sign up for alert systems, both in the contact tracing and in your town emergency systems.
Right.
So if you did not sign up for that, then be very suspicious of ones that are coming through. And phishing emails, they're just every day. You're just going to get hundreds of them. And so be very careful about opening any that are from a source that you don't trust. And over at the top of the URL, and if I show you, for instance, the CGA email, you're always going to look for a little lock icon up in the upper left-hand corner of the website URL. If it's not there, it is not safe to go to. That's just
I didn't
basic
even know
cyber
that.
security. If you
Wow.
yeah, and unfortunately it's small. You can't always see it, right? And you're asking people with low vision to always look for that little
Right.
icon there, because you may be being taken to a very insecure site that's going to lock up your and hold your cyber security hijacked. It's really, really hard. And then be very careful about researching before you donate, and really kind of, if this is legitimately from your bank or legitimately from Medicare, or legitimately from Social Security, you kind of need to close the browser, close the email, or call the bank and say, did you really
Right.
send this to me? Do we really have a problem? Because it's just so easy to have legitimate looking mail that comes to you that's not legitimate, that's saying you owe something, that's saying you know, you have an outstanding bill, you have to pay it right away. So just you know, real quick, we have these overlapping areas of physical, psychological abuse, financial exploitation, and neglect. And so what I'm asking the public to do during this period of prolonged isolation is to you know, really check in and make an intentional effort to go old school and check on the people who live alone, call them, socially distant, show up on their porch and, you know, on the porch,
Yeah.
and wave and have a conversation that's distant. Let them hear your voice. Ask people to tell you about a favorite memory or their childhood. Get creative ways, of course, Zoom and Skype, but to volunteer to connect with people, especially old school, especially with regularly scheduled outreach, phone calls. Isolation is one of those top risk factors. And I did send you this a couple of questions to just ask somebody. Do you feel safe where you're living? Are you relying on anyone for help? Is there anything you need that you're not getting? Has anyone hurt you or made you feel ashamed, threatened, or afraid, or made you sign something you did not understand, or give out personal information on the phone or over the line? So our top risk factors are isolation, early cognitive impairment. So people may be socially really engaged, but financial literacy has declined. That's really easy to take advantage of. And third is living in proximity with somebody who can't financially be self-sustaining or has a substance abuse problem or a history of aggression. So actually living in proximity is another big risk factor for abuse and neglect.
And COVID has just exacerbated it. You know, our seniors are at risk in a normal, you know, year, but with the COVID, it just makes them much more vulnerable. I call it to the bullies.
Yes, and there seems to be just a desperation of both people in aggressive behavior, but also financial desperation that are looking for a way to exploit and target people out of desperation. So that's why we have to just raise the profile, raise the red flags. And if you I mean, people are so lonely that they will talk to people that they know are scams because they have somebody to talk to. So how can we build a buffer of outreach and regular, friendly, trusted contact, and not to exploit but to connect?
Right. and we've lost a little bit of it, but I see people really trying to reach out. But 100 years ago, you would go to church, and if Farmer Joe's wife got ill, okay, how are we going to support them? Everybody make a
That's right.
meal. There was much more community, and I see a lot of that happening. That makes me gives me hope of people helping people, etc. But we don't have the same mechanism as we used to have years ago. You know, it's hard.
Right. So we have to be a little bit more creative and think village. Who are the people? You know, social media makes us think that we have access to, you know, this huge wide audience, but how can we pull our attention back to the people within our immediate community and use the senior centers or the, you know, faith communities and the already built in networks
Right.
to support those in creating a very intentional outreach during this time of isolation, because people aren't coming back to church and to those senior center activities yet, but they're still there. So we can enhance that outreach and those connections and resume some of those, and really do it with an eye of preventing abuse and neglect, because the biggest incidence in Connecticut is really neglect, and it's just people are unable to get the care they need and the food and the support and the services they need in their own home,
Right.
to be thriving, and that can occur very quickly without any intentional abuse, right?
Right.
And that is just as the adverse impact is just as damaging.
Or they don't say anything because they don't want to bother their children. They don't want to be a burden, you know, many things. So it is up to us to be checking in and doing.
Right.
And I do know from a friend from one of the churches, she says they have more people attending now through Zoom.
Yep.
People have come back to their church. They have newer people, but it's working to keep that intimacy, like you said, of taking care of your own or your group, or, you know, really getting down into the weeds about what's happening with people and checking on them. So, you know, that's good.
Yeah, maybe that'll be one of our real learnings, that we do community a little differently coming out of this, that we don't make assumptions, and that we just create a you know, I keep saying it's old school. Like, all this technology is great, but that old school really outreach of concern on going to the porch, going to the back porch, you know, hollering
Right.
out and checking on people is the greatest buffer and protection against abuse and neglect. Because when people have no one else but the abuser to rely on for that very essential help,
Right.
people are trapped, because they rely on this family member or trusted person to get them their groceries, to get them their meals, to get them, you know, medication or whatever. So, you know,
I did see
you know,
one of the states, I know it's not in Connecticut, but their zoning laws now allow for tiny houses in the backyard. So that you can have your separate, you know, your privacy to a certain extent, but you can keep someone you love close by, and they feel independent too, like they're not a burden. It'll be nice if one day that maybe that'll have to be something we'll have to work on. Yeah.
yeah, I would love to see us be really creative about intergenerational community. What does that look like? You know, we've really been wedded to this idea of single family, single home zoning, if you will, but those single homes are often have many stairs to get into and to the bedrooms, and they are not very accessible for aging in place. They are not very mobility friendly. And so how can we reimagine a future where we are living self-determined but connected, and have some independence and some you know, mobility access, and not be trapped and dependent on people, you know, living
Right.
in our house for just basic needs. you know, we have basically designed our, colonial, you know, New England communities around, uh, you know, basically a shorter lifespan, I guess, you know, and then, and not really an active aging full value
Right,
lifespan that wasn't dependent on caregivers in the
there's,
family.
right, there's been some creative, I saw, I think it was in England, they have a program for college students to live with an elderly person, you know, and everybody's
Mhm.
vetted and goes through the process. And so they go back and they may, depending on the person, you know, make dinner, take the trash out, do things, and they get free room and board near the university where they want to live. You know, there's all kinds of creative ways that we can do, but I like that word that you use, intergenerational, instead of just putting them aside somewhere's way out there. How do we keep them in the community, help keep them and the
Right,
quality of life?
right. Intergenerational community and you know, micro neighborhoods. What would that look like? Like you said, maybe it's what do they call those little tiny houses? But maybe it's, you know, an accessory apartment or dwelling, or, you know, maybe they're in the ground floor and the students or renters or, you know, are in the upper floor. I don't know, but we have, and they're not all related. Like, that's the thing, is that people move, and this society is mobile. They don't just stay in one place where they grew up. So
Well, it's funny
how
'cause
can we imagine a win-win?
right, the younger generation,
Go
because
ahead.
you know I'm involved with Main Street, and how centers of town
Yep.
and main streets are becoming more important again to build that community around them where they can walk to everything, they can do everything, and that, and affordable housing mixed in the center, not in the section of town where poor people live. You know, that's the worst place to go and
Right.
build for affordable housing. So I see that gives me
Right.
hope, and there's been like this new push, you know, for main streets to have that walkability, safety, community, etc. So, you know, maybe we have hope.
I think we have hope. I think we are, you know, we are open to new possibilities. And that is my hope, that, yes, we're the land of steady habits, but we're also a pragmatic people that, that, you know, we want our freedoms, we want our choices, and we're only limited by our imagination and our will. So if we can imagine a new paradigm of what that looks like to age well, then, and create some public will and momentum around it, then we make policy change, and that's why we're
Right.
policymakers,
Well, and
is to help implement those policy changes.
if we're all lucky, we'll reach that age where we will be able to live life to our fullest potential. But do you have any last comments, Anne?
No, I just thank you for having me and to talk about this, and to hopefully empower every single person that watches this or listens to be a champion for safer communities for older adults. We're all
Right.
aging. That's why I'm on the aging committee, because, you know, I want to be, you know, looking at I want to be reimagining aging well, and uh, being part of that public will, and as well as being part of uh, championing safer communities for older adults here in Connecticut and everywhere. So thank
And
you for
good
having
point.
me. Thank you for allowing me to don my cape of elder abuse, neglect, prevention.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on, and I want to thank you, you know, and I'm sure on behalf of everyone watching, for doing what you do and being in the legislature. As we both know, it's not always easy, but I know you're always in there fighting for people. You're fighting for people, and thank you for that.
Thank you for being my partner in the fight.
Thank you. Well, thank you everyone for watching. I want to thank Howard from Win TV for recording this for us and helping us with that, getting the slides up. And I hope everyone has a great week, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.